Dota 2 is a game that enormously rewards confidence. There's a lot of time pressure in the actions that you take in the game, which means you can really be punished for hesitation. There's also very complicated decision making, which means there's a lot of room for doubt to creep in. And the combination of these factors means that having strong convictions and acting decisively can really be rewarded in this game. Of course, in a normal game of Dota, there's a lot of smaller factors like individual technical skill that can be the distinguishing factor. But when it comes to the international, we're at the highest level of play, we're in the 0.0001%. The differences between players are just not as big. The technical distinctions are just not as big. And so confidence ends up playing a much bigger role. These sort of macro level concepts like confidence, like strategy, end up playing a much bigger role. And confidence and strategy actually reinforce each other in the sense that for you to have a novel strategy that's ahead of the curve, you require a certain level of confidence. And sometimes having that strategy can also give you confidence, and so they reinforce each other. So basically, I think confidence is a very important framing going into the international. And I think that in reality, we don't see enough of this framing happening. And so I wanted to make just a short presentation on what is confidence, what's going on, what kind of role it's playing, and how that might play out this year at TI10. So what is confidence? Well, first of all, it's belief and the ability of that belief to unlock possibilities for you. There's a great example that's often used in philosophy when talking about questions of rationality. If a goalkeeper playing European football has to stand against a penalty, they know objectively that the vast majority, something like 80% of penalties are scored. It's very hard for a goalkeeper to save a penalty. And yet, believing that you won't save the penalty is not going to help you. Right? So if you just look at the evidence, maybe you should believe you won't save it because based on the evidence, people don't usually save penalties. But the fact of believing that you can save it, or that maybe even you will save it, actually increases your chance of being able to do that. And this is the kind of role that confidence plays in general, in sport, in gaming, everywhere in your life. It actually unlocks possibilities. There are certain things you cannot do without the confidence in yourself that you might be able to do them first. A champion won't just say, well, I guess we're ranked 10th on ELO going into the tournament, so we'll just come 10th, and that'll be great. At the same time, you can't just will belief. It's not possible for human beings to just decide, okay, I'm going to believe I'm the best, and then believe it. And so you need to somehow have something to believe in, and that's something that actually needs to be cultivated, and the highest level coaches will be working on that months before the international. But other than belief, confidence is also about pressure. How do you manage pressure? The international is the biggest pressure Dota event of the season. In fact, it's possibly one of the biggest pressure esports events ever, especially now that we haven't had one for 2 seasons. There is so much money at stake. There is so much glory and pride at stake. It's really easy to be swallowed up by the sheer scale of things. Many teams over the last few years have learned that a healthier approach is to sort of take one game at a time and not actually think about the whole thing all at once to avoid being overwhelmed. Some teams, sometimes very special teams, like the OG of the previous 2 TIs, have found ways to even weaponize pressure, to actually feel more empowered by the pressure, to feel like it almost like you stubbornly have something to prove. The pressure is this person that doesn't believe you can do it. And so the pressure makes you feel like, well, screw you, I'm going to do it, I'm going to show you. And that's one of the really positive sides of confidence, when you can actually wield the pressure as a weapon. There's questions asked about sources of confidence as well. What is your source of confidence? Where does your confidence come from? Like I said earlier, human beings can't just decide to believe things and then believe them. The old Virtus Pro roster, which dominated the DPC for 1.5 seasons, but just couldn't get results at TI, is a good example of a lacking source of confidence, in the sense that those players believed in their own individual ability, and they believed in their results. But what happens when a team whose confidence depends on individual ability and results suddenly doesn't get those results. Well, what happens is the thing that gave them confidence very quickly disappears, and suddenly they can't perform at the level they were at. And so what you really need is something that you can believe in, that you will still believe in even when things are going badly. That's what's going to give you the confidence to unlock the possibilities of higher play, to unlock the possibilities of competing at that pushed level, and maybe even to wield the pressure to your advantage. So if we look at some historical examples, in case you don't really believe me, TI has often been settled by confidence. We can talk about Alliance in 2013, who kind of dominated for months going into the event. They won a few tournaments, they developed a new playstyle, the concept of split pushing, the specialization of heroes for people like Bulldog, for people like EGM, the fact that Bulldog could play more of a greedy role in the off lane with S4 playing a less greedy role in the mid lane. What we see from Alliance in 2013 is that they were very willing to push concepts of how Dota is played compared to the time where the first few years of Dota 2 were very sort of stagnant in terms of this is the meta, this is what you're supposed to do. Another example is PPD going into TI5, who very casually said before the tournament, this feels like my TI. In fact, he tweeted in a few different places, I'm going to win this international in the month leading up to that tournament. And you might say that sounds really arrogant, but there was a sort of matter-of-factness about it contextually when he did it, which actually you can contrast quite nicely to more recently in the last year. We've heard Seb say things like, it's offensive to me that teams believe they can beat us, and that feels a bit put on. But PPD's confidence going into TI5 was very kind of, this is just what I'm feeling right now. And I think it really did put them in a position where they were the one team that were able to stop CDEC, the actual rising team of the tournament. They were able to sort of sit back and use their mental fortitude, their position of strength, to figure out the team to beat and take the whole tournament. Another example is Wings. I mean, very, very obvious example. Everyone will be familiar with this one. I mean, I said Alliance pushed concepts of Dota. Wings basically reinvented the wheel in 2016. They just didn't care about any of the normal heuristics of Dota. They just said, we're going to rethink how this game works. We're going to rethink how you draft heroes. We're going to rethink how you choose your items. Wings made the statement that all Dota players before them had actually been lazy, relying on assumptions and not making individual decisions. And actually, it's possible to make more small decisions and optimize on more small decisions. And the confidence it requires to go to the biggest tournament ever at the time, TI6 it was, and just do that. Just bring your totally different, novel approach is enormous. And lastly, I mean, I guess the last obvious example is OG. Many people think that OG only won TI8 at least because of a psychological advantage over LGD. There's still a lot of people who think that LGD, in the pure Dota terms, whatever that means, might have been a stronger team. But OG had this kind of, what people call the power of friendship, I call stubborn belief in each other. And an intentional approach to playing the mental game, an intentional approach to creativity, an intentional approach to, the chat wheeling stuff. I don't think that's accidental. It's part of the, certainly Seb is a player who for many years has thought about this kind of stuff, the mental sides of the game. And so we have these many examples of teams going into TI with some kind of confidence for some kind of reason, or building it during the event, and that being a really powerful weapon for them to win the event. So what about if we look at the TI10 teams? We see that there are different teams coming in with different claims to different kinds of confidence. There are also different teams coming in with different sources to their confidence and different preparation for their mental game. I'm only going to look at a few examples because the video goes way too long otherwise, but LGD is the obvious place to start. Clear favorites coming to the tournament. Obviously that gives you a certain kind of confidence. Unfortunately, what it also means is it gives you the biggest pressure of everyone. And this has been a real talking point and a real decisive factor in the last few years, because people watched OG come win TI8 as complete underdogs. And ever since then, I think a lot of top teams have been thinking, maybe it's really not worth it to go into the international as a favorite. What we see contrasting to LGD is teams like Secret, who look like they didn't even really try that hard during the season. They just got to TI and then mostly weren't that concerned. It seems like EG haven't played a non-DPC event for over a year. And so these teams look like they intentionally prepared for TI in a let's not burn ourselves out, let's not put a target on our back. The time to really peak in our performance and our level is TI. Obviously, there's a risk involved there. When you're competing in less events, when you're playing less officials, maybe you can get left behind. But that's a calculated risk. And certainly when it comes to Secret, e.g., I'll talk about now, it's a little bit different, but certainly when it comes to Secret, they're a team that have been the favorites a few times, and the pressure hasn't worked for them. And so I respect that they've taken a different approach this time around. So yeah, I mean, what I wanted to say about EG, which is slightly different to what I was saying about Secret, is that EG definitely have a confidence in a system, right? That's their source of confidence. Their special source of confidence is that out of all the Dota 2 teams in the world right now, I think they're the most drilled into a particular system. They're very predictable in that sense. They do the same kinds of drafts over and over again. The players perform the same kinds of roles in every draft, in every game. And some people see it as a weakness, but it's also a strength because it makes them very resilient. It means that all the players understand their roles very well in every situation. And it means that they don't fall prey to, overcompensating for their opponents. They don't worry so much about what their opponents are trying to do because there's a certain extent to which their picks and their play and their plans always have to fit into a certain mold. That's certainly a type of confidence that EG will have over some opponents. Going back to Secret, a special kind of confidence I believe Secret have and have always had, and every version of Secret for many years has had, is the confidence in their captain. Puppy does have this kind of domineering overlord style to him. He, for me anyway, is the greatest Dota player of all time. He's achieved everything. He's got the individual ability, he's got the experience to dwarf anyone else's, certainly in the West. But I think there's an extent to which this can also be a weakness. Because what happens if Puppy flounders for a moment? What happens if he has an off day? And a lot of the belief of the team is built on belief in him. Suddenly it can come crumbling down. And then there's OG, who certainly to the world are trying to present themselves as having the same kind of power, friendship, belief in each other as what they won 2 TIs with. Question is whether or not you believe it. They have different players, different identity, different connection with each other. Is their confidence now legacy confidence? I certainly worry when you see, like I was saying earlier, when you see Seb saying, I feel offended by people thinking they can beat us, it doesn't read the same way as PPD before TI5 saying, I'm going to win this TI. It reads as put on. It reads as he's trying to make it like they have that level of confidence, but maybe they don't actually have it. And that's one of the things we're going to see tested when we get to TI10. But importantly, I think to note, and why I've used these teams as examples, is that all 4 of these teams, LGD, Secret, OG, and EG, have taken deliberate strategies to mental preparation for this tournament. Whether it's not playing that much, or whether it's LGD, enter all the tournaments, but don't show your best stuff, just have fun, just be creative. Whether it's OG hiring a psychologist that they've done a few times. It is now a part of the game at the top level, and I think over time all the other teams are going to catch up on this, to explicitly prepare yourselves in some way to be best mentally positioned when the challenge actually comes. So I can't tell you, unfortunately, which team is going to be the most confident at TI10. That's impossible. But I can talk a bit about ways to spot confidence if you're a viewer and you want to kind of build this narrative in your head of who you think is going to be one of the favorites or who can push the furthest. One thing is defeats. One of the most obvious things is defeats. Defeats test mental fortitude, and usually a bigger defeat is a bigger test. How does a team rally after a loss? So during the group stages early on in the tournament, even though the stakes are a bit lower in those matches sometimes, watch what a team does immediately after losing a game, especially if it's a big loss. do they look tilted? That's a bad sign for confidence, for sure. Or do they look like they really just pat each other on the back and got back up and back to their normal selves? Another thing is there's sometimes small micro level players that suggest confidence, especially from the sort of the talent roles, like the position 2 mid laner, the position 4 playmaker, willingness to take certain kinds of risks, decisive movements. As a team, fast play. You'll hear about this all the time from Dota commentators, but fast play basically means instead of going from making play 1 to play 2 to play 3, your play is just kind of like a flow. Multiple plays just kind of flow into each other because you're so quick moving from one decision to the next that they aren't even really decision points. That kind of speed suggests a level of confidence, because in order to play that fast, it shows that you're not stopping and hesitating each time on each decision. Another big one is trust. Big part of, if any of you remember the old MVP Phoenix success, was that they had this player QO who could kind of just be a Phantom Assassin, jump in, and trust that his teammates would back him up. And a lot of the time, those kinds of decisions, you're a potentially squishy hero. If the enemy team reacts and your team isn't ready, you just die instantly. You look like a fool. But if you can trust that your teammates will do the things they need to do to empower you to do the things you need to do, your play is actually extremely good and extremely exciting and extremely fiery. So those kinds of trust-based plays, when you see a player do something that only makes sense if they're 100% sure their teammate will do something else, that degree of trust can reveal a level of confidence in that player and in that team. Another one I've mentioned earlier already in the presentation is creativity. Oftentimes when a player or a team is willing to be creative about their item decisions, their drafts, that's a suggestion of confidence, because certainly if you're harboring more doubts and more hesitation, you're going to just stick to the tried and true conventional wisdom most of the time. So basically what I've talked about today is the importance of confidence, how confidence features in every TI win, how it means more at the level of TI because the other difference makers are not as big of a deal between the teams that are already at that level. How a lot of the big teams have already thought about this, I think, and prepared themselves mentally going into the tournament. And lastly, I've given you some examples of how you might be on the lookout of who's looking confident and what that might mean. Hopefully this was a useful video and it will inform the way that you think when you're watching TI10. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give me a follow at Scansor on Twitter.